Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is doing good at home. Stay at home, stay safe, children. Today we're going to continue with the next topic, that is, what are the measures adopted to combat the situation of excess demand and deficit demand. As I've already told you, children, both these situations are not very good in the long run, because both these situations have an impact on output, employment, as well as price level. We need to bring the economy back to somewhere to a situation sort of equilibrium. So broadly, there are two measures adopted, the fiscal measures and the monetary measures, also known as the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. The fiscal policy or the fiscal measures are related to the expenditures and revenue of the government. It is basically a policy which helps us to use the government expenditures and the government revenues to manipulate and to increase or decrease the aggregate demand. In the monetary measures, these are the measures which are adopted by the government, the RBI, to regulate the money supply in the economy. With the help of these measures, we are able to control the money supply. We are able to put the credit control into a direction. You are able to make it a liberal policy, or you can make it a very tight policy, a conservative policy. Now, the simple formula which you need to understand, the simple methodology which you need to understand, whenever it is, this is a tip for you, whenever there is a situation of excess demand, हमने बेसिकली क्या करना है, एग्रीगेट डिमांड को कम कर देना है, हमने उसे इक्विलिब्रियम, जो एक्चुअल एग्रीगेट डिमांड है, उसे हमने डिजायर्ड एग्रीगेट डिमांड तक लेकर आना है. सो बेसिकली हम सब कुछ ऐसा करेंगे इकोनॉमी में जहां एग्रीगेट डिमांड कम हो जाए. एंड इन केस ऑफ डेफिसिट डिमांड, हमने डिमांड को बढ़ाना है. सो हमने वो सब कुछ करना है जहां एग्रीगेट डिमांड इज in a position to reach the actual required aggregate demand in an economy. Okay, children, we are going to be understanding the measures to control excess demand and deficit demand with the help of this flow chart and these notes. The information is also given very well in the book, but then this will help you and support you to a better understanding. Now, there are two policies I told you, the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. Let us understand the fiscal policy first. When we talk about fiscal policy, I told you it is a policy which is related to the budget, right, the government budget. It is related to the government's expenditure or spending and the government's revenue. हम इसे expenditure policy and revenue policy भी कह सकते हैं. Now, when we talk about the government's revenue, there are normally three sources where the government generates funds. One is taxes, second is public debt or borrowing, and the third is deficit financing, printing of new notes. Borrowing, all of you know, when the government borrows either from the public or from outside, and taxes when there are direct or indirect taxes. The government has to incur an expenditure on the social welfare, the economic reasons. The government has to incur expenditure on the public work, public health, the education, जितना भी कुछ खर्चा सरकार करती है. Now, for the sake of convenience, I have followed a new strategy wherein you can see very clearly I'm explaining both the excess demand and the deficit demand measures of fiscal policy measures simultaneously. I am first going to be explaining to you the excess demand measures, and then I am going to be explaining the deficit demand. But for learning, these two are simultaneously done here. Now, if you look at the first measure under fiscal policy, taxation. I just told you in excess demand, it's a situation of aggregate demand more than aggregate supply. हमारा purpose क्या है? हमने aggregate demand कम करनी है economy में. Obviously, अगर aggregate demand कम करनी है, मतलब the households should be spending less. So what does the government do? The government imposes high taxes. The government imposes new taxes. You know what happens when the taxes are imposed? The disposable income of the households decrease. When the disposable income decreases, but obviously what will happen to your consumption? It will also fall. When the consumption falls, consumption expenditure falls, aggregate demand is also reduced. When the aggregate demand reduces, the situation of excess demand is combated. Combated मतलब controlled. अगर मान लो तुम्हारी डेफिसिट डिमांड सिचुएशन है, Deficit demand में क्या होता है? Aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. We need to increase the actual aggregate demand. सरकार क्या करेगी? It will try to reduce taxes. Right? It will try to reduce the taxes. It will try to, by reducing taxes or abolishing taxes, the government will increase the disposable income of the people. That is exactly what should happen right now in a COVID-19 situation. इससे क्या होगा? The consumers will increase their expenditure. जब consumers अपना expenditure बढ़ाएंगे, obviously firms भी production बढ़ाने की कोशिश करेंगे. The aggregate demand will increase, and therefore the situation of deficit demand will be controlled. Continuing with the next measure. Under fiscal measure only, the second is that the government can go in for public debt or borrowings. If it is a situation of excess demand, obviously the government will increase. The government should increase the public debt. The government should increase the borrowing from the people. If the government does so, then the income level of the people will reduce. Thereby the consumption expenditure also will reduce, and aggregate demand will also reduce. But if it is a situation of deficit demand, लोगों के पास already पैसा नहीं है, then the government should decrease the public borrowing, should decrease the public debt. With this, the income of the people will increase, and thereby their aggregate demand will also increase. If you look at deficit financing means, I told you, printing of new notes in order to meet the deficit. In the case of excess demand, the government will always reduce deficit financing. The government will not print new notes. With this, what will happen? People will be left with less money supply in economy, and therefore aggregate demand will fall. But if it is a situation of deficit demand, in a situation of deficit demand, the government has no other option except to print new notes. The government will increase its deficit financing, will increase the money supply, thereby the aggregate demand will also increase. Children, this was about the revenue policy of the government. If you talk about the government's expenditure on the other end, see, excess demand में सरकार ने already demand ज़्यादा है. The government will try to reduce its expenditure on education, health, defense, etc. With this, what happens? जब government अपनी expenditure कम कर देती है, obviously the demand in economy will reduce, and therefore aggregate demand in totality will also reduce. But suppose it is a situation of deficit demand, जब already there is a problem, demand कम है, right? Because maybe of many reasons, we've already discussed the reasons earlier. So the government will by itself increase the expenditure on education, health, defense. This is exactly what is happening in an economy at the moment in the COVID-19 situation. इससे what happens to the level of aggregate demand? It increases. We try to bring it to an equilibrium. So a quick recapitulation of the fiscal measures. The fiscal measures are four basically. First one was the taxation policy. Second was public debt or borrowing from the public. Third was deficit financing. And the fourth was the government expenditure in an economy. These are the four fiscal measures which can be used in order to combat a situation of excess demand or deficit demand.